So we are going to start off this mock-up course by doing something as simple as possible to kind of get used to working with and creating mock-ups. So the best way to do that is to show you a mock-up that's already been created for you. You can find all sorts of free Photoshop mock-ups online. All you have to do is Google it. But I've downloaded this sweater one from graphicburger.com, and I'll also provide the link with all the other links in the link resource. And we're going to work with this one, and we're going to show you kind of how they're put together, so when we create our own from scratch, we'll have a good idea of the basic working components of a mock-up. So whenever you open up a Photoshop mock-up that you download online, you can scroll through all of these different layers, and there's usually a layer that has this red highlight to it. Not always, but it seems to be a very standard marker of the layers that you can double-click and add your own graphic to it. And a lot of times when I look at mock-ups to kind of see how they're built or constructed, I like to toggle on my visibility to kind of see what component it is that layer is affecting. So I can go ahead and toggle through these and find out what exactly that layer is pertaining to. So if I go down to the hoodie and toggle that on and off, it has the hoodie layer, or shadow. Sometimes they're labeled correctly and sometimes they're not, so you can always just toggle and you can notice the shadow toggles on and off. So you can see how these mock-ups are built with lots of different layers. Some are very simple and some could have 20 or 30 layers to them depending on the customability of each mock-up. So let's go ahead and do something very simple. We're going to replace this graphic with a logo that I already have. So when you're ready to replace one of these layers, let's say, let's toggle this one off. This is called the kangaroo pocket. Right here, let's say we want to change that color. We're going to go ahead and click right here on the Smart Object thumbnail, right in this left side, just double click. It will open it up in a brand new window, and this is where we can edit that area, and then we'll close it and save it, and it will automatically populate on the final mockup. So we want to change the color of this pocket, so we can double click this and just do a color overlay, or we could do something a little easier and do a rectangle tool and draw over top. And what's great about using the rectangle tool is I can double click this and be able to change it much easier than going into doing a color overlay. So what color do I choose? I want to create a sweater for a fake museum, and I have a handy file for you. It's a vector file, and it's got a bunch of fake logos on there and brands that you can use so you can practice when you create your own mock-ups or when you move throughout the course. You have kind of some logos to already just slap on there, and you don't have to sit there and create your own logo for everything. And so for this, I want to create it for this Marsh Museum of Modern Art, just kind of a fake museum brand I came up with, and I have some brand colors. So let's get a pop of color. This is kind of how the color of the sweater will be kind of blue with these bright neon colors. So what would be a really good accent pocket color? So I'm thinking maybe this bright orange. We can just give it a try. And so I'm going to just double click the swatch. I'm in Adobe Illustrator, by the way, and double click the swatch. And I have this hex code. So I find hex codes really easy to kind of bring back and forth between Illustrator and Photoshop and try to do color matching. So I'm just going to sample that hex code and just pop it right down here. See right here in this area, and click OK. And so now when I close down the window, I'm just going to close it, and it's going to ask me if I want to save, and you're going to say yes, and it's going to automatically populate and change that pocket. So now that pocket is orange, and I could do the same thing, go back and change the color, and it will automatically populate. Close the window, and just like that. So let's see what other objects you can change here. So let's toggle the other red layer, and that's going to be the entire sweater. So let's double click on this Smart Object thumbnail, and it's going to populate with what is on the entire sweater. So this is what we want to do, and this is your safe area, which is really handy that they included this. This is where it's going to actually show up on the hoodie. So it's going to show you all this stuff is not even going to show up on the hoodie, just the part within this safe area. So that gives us a good idea of where to place the logo. So let's bring in some of our assets. We can take a sample of our blue color. We could just do a rectangle tool and just paste that same color in there and bring that below so we can kind of see the safe area. So now we need to place our logo on top of here. So we already have this prepared. Let's do a vertical logo. I think that would fit better on the sweater. than a horizontal logo. So now we have to think about placement, and this is a big deal. We don't ever want to put an object too big on a sweater. It overwhelms, especially with logos. You don't want to have it so small that it gets drowned out by the sweater. So you want to have something, a nice in-between size right about here. Of course, we can always go back and easily adjust this. So let's go ahead and close this tab out. It's going to ask us to save, and we're going to save. It's going to automatically pop onto the mock-up. And there we go. It went ahead and popped onto the mock-up. What we can do is we can go back in and lower it a little bit. Sometimes you have to go back and adjust. Let's go ahead and toggle off the safe area because I believe it's populating with the safe area on. So let's turn that off and let's put this logo down just a hair. Let's see how that looks. And it looks like it needs to be shifted over to the left a little bit. And there was a little error that came up. And some mock-ups have errors like that, but sometimes if you ignore those errors, it continues to do it well. So I'm going to shift it over to the left. When I close this, I went to save, and it does say could not update smart object file because the file was not found. I believe it has to deal with maybe this file not being available, but that's okay because we're replacing it anyway. So I would just kind of ignore that for this. Sometimes you'll run into those errors with ones you download online, and that's okay because you could still push through and work it out. So now that we have our logo positioned and we have the color we like, we can continue to modify this. So there looks to be another layer that we can modify, which is the sleeves and the bottom here. So let's see what layer that is. Sometimes if they don't layer it, it's sometimes hard to find. Let's go ahead and locate that. There it is, cuffs color. So we can simply double click this. Anytime you kind of see this presentation with the color slider and this icon, it means you can double click and go ahead and change the color. So let's find a complementary color. So perhaps pink might look really good as a complement because we already have kind of this bright yellow as the pocket. And so the pink will kind of bring out those two colors in the logo. And it seems very thematic, like a theme. We're sticking with some very simple color palettes here. We're not trying to use too many colors out of the brand. And I think it works really well on the sweater. And so now we get to kind of zoom in here and see what other little details we can modify. And this is what's great about downloading Photoshop mockups online is once you understand how mockups are created, you can change a lot of things about it and make it as unique as you'd like. So let's go ahead and look at toggle on some layers and see what we have here. So we have the hoodie here, and here's a shadow layer. And we're going to talk a lot about how to hand draw shadows, and this is exactly what the mockup creator did here. See how they kind of hand drew these shadows using a brush tool, and we're going to be able to do that with our own mockups, and that will usually be on its own layer that you can toggle on and off. Background texture, it looks like I can change this background texture by dragging in any texture I'd like, or I can toggle it off and have it be on a simple background, which we can do. And then you have your background layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my own background layer in there. I'm going to do some colors here. So let's do the rectangle tool. I'm just going to create a new layer by doing this. And I'm going to double click the object here. And we can make it blue to kind of make it blend in. We can make it a little bit darker to make those colors pop out a little bit more. So if I made it the same color, they kind of compete and it's hard to see the border of the object in the background. But if I make it a little darker, you're sticking with the brand colors, yet you're also providing just a little more contrast between your object and the background. So this is where we can customize it. We can make it a brighter color. We can put kind of a watermark in the background. We can provide our own texture that might be a part of our brand. So let's go revisit our colors. Ooh, look at this bright orange. Let's see if I can't find out the hex code for that. So just double click the swatch over here, get a copy and get my hex code, and let's see if I can't change this color super quick. Paste it in there. And now we have a really bright orange to kind of really be high contrast with the object. So let's add a little bit of a branded element here. So let's take a little small component of our logo. So maybe these little arches here. See if I need to ungroup that. Let's drag it all the way in here. I'm just making kind of like a watermark in the background to make the mock-up feel more custom. So I'm just kind of dragging this bigger, just making a little watermark element. And I can always double click this and make that a color overlay. Just double clicked this area right here, the Vector Smart object right here in the text, just to bring up the layer style panel. I'm just going to do a simple color overlay. And we can click on the background color and make it a little darker to add a branded element there. And there we go, just a simple watermark to bring out the brand in the center, but also have something in the background to tie it all together as a branded presentation. So that was pretty simple. Let's see what else we can customize. And that was just adding our own things at the bottom and the background here. We even just toggled that background texture off. And let's see if we have this texture. I wonder if we could do a blending mode, which we'll talk about a lot in this class. They're an essential part of mockup creation. I'm going to go ahead and select this background texture, and here's how you access your blending modes right here in your layers panel. Right now it's normal, but we can let certain pixels behind it through to create different effects, and we'll go over this even more so you can see how a little bit of that texture comes through, but yet the color still remains. And that is the power of blending modes. And I talk a lot about that in my courses. If you've taken some of my other design courses, you'll be right at home with that. Just adds a little bit of pizzazz and texture to that. You can bring in your own texture and do a different blending mode to bring in texture to that flat background. But let's say we'll toggle that off for now. I just wanted to kind of demonstrate that. So it looks like we have, this is very highly customizable. So you'll see a couple components about this. So this is a changeable color, changeable shape color, just like we've been changing before. We can change the color. Ooh, we can even make that orange. How cool is that? And click off. And this is a layering mask. And once again, layering masks are a big part of kind of cropping certain parts out so that if I change this color, it only changes the color on that specific shape. And we're going to be doing a lot of that when we create our own mock-ups. So I thought that was neat to add a little orange on the inner hoodie. And looks like there's drawstrings that you can change. That's the shadow of the drawstrings. And this is the actual string chords. I'm assuming you could probably modify this any way you want and change the color. Well, you can, wonderful. So if I make those yellow, that would be really, really interesting. So there we go. It's our first mock-up that we created for a sweater for a museum. And so you could see the original mock-up and you could see how we kind of changed it up a little bit to make it our own. And I think the background makes a big difference in making it unique to our brand. It doesn't have the default background. We've really kind of changed more than just the sweater and made it an overall presentation. So this was the very, very simple first project. We're going to do one more already made mock-up of a book cover, and we're going to take a book cover we've already designed. We designed this in a previous design class, but you can take any book design or any pictures, and we're going to work through this so we can get to know how mock-ups are set up before we start to create our own from scratch.